To all my moms moving on, I have something amazing for you. If you're ready to move on from your engagement ring, the experts at Worthy can help you turn it into cash, fast and risk-free. Worthy does all the work, and their competitive auctions get you the best deal possible. Over 45,000 people have already moved on with Worthy. Are you ready to move on too? Visit worthy.com/moms to get an extra $100 when your jewelry sells for over $1,500. That's worthy.com/moms for a special bonus offer just for the Moms Moving On community. So many women who come to me and they'll say, I want to get divorced, but I don't want to be that single mom. I'm like, but that's not what you have to be, just because, you know, we've been told that if you end up single mom, you're bad, and, you know, the man is better off. Welcome back to another episode of Moms Moving On. I'm so excited to be here today with Ashley Simpo. She is a writer, mother, advocate, and speaker living in New York City. She's a co-parent. She is so wise. Her Instagram account, if you took a look at it, you'd know why we love her, and really appreciate the work she puts out into the world. And we're going to have a really interesting talk today and take a look at the term single mother. And I'm really excited to dive deep with you, Ashley. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here, Michelle.
It's an honor. Okay, so I took like the website bio for you and just threw it out into the world, but let's hear the real bio.
Oh, wow. California raised, New York made. I feel like I've lived here my entire adult life. Writer, editor, advocate in many ways for many people, many things. And yeah, just like a mom who is trying to expand what that word means and redefine it in every way that I can. Ashley.
Which is, I feel like in today's era of motherhood, we're all just out here on our own journeys trying to redefine whatever our experiences looked like, good or bad. You know, I think there's so much more education out there, but there's also so much more opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bigger gap between classes, you know, different systems. And you said something really profound offline. You said that for you, growing up with a single mom, you experienced something very different than what your single motherhood journey looks like. And I want you to touch on that a little bit for people, because it's the exact same situation I had. And it really spoke to me.
Yeah, I think this term single motherhood is so loaded. And when I hear single mother, I think of my mom, who was divorced by the time I was 12, and my father was no longer a part of our lives. So she was raising my sister and I on a single income, no co-parenting involved, no shared weekends, none of that. And, you know, we also had, of course, community from family, aunts, grandmothers, and that kind of kinship. But in terms of a co-parent, which I think it feels differently when the father or the other parent of your child is involved. You know, there's a different type of comfort level. But that was what I experienced growing up. And so my own experience with single parenthood is as a divorced person who my child's father is very much a part of our lives. You know, we both show up on the first day of school. We coordinate school supplies. We have schedules. You know, he's with him Friday. He's picking him up today. He's going to be with him all week. I have 2 incomes that are contributing to this child's life. So those things, I think, when I think about the single parenthood that I experienced growing up with my mom, feels like a privilege compared to sort of like the government's definition statistically of what makes a single mother. And like what happens when you Google single mother, what you see is that there are a lot of people, some of who, like my mother, I grew up with, or that I even know today, who are really doing this alone. And it just doesn't feel right to me to say that I'm a single mom. I just don't feel like that's what
I feel you. And I too had the same experience. I felt like my mom had, my dad took off, you know, was left with no child support, no financial support. She did have family that could contribute if necessary, but she was an immigrant to this country, had never held a job in this country. And for her, it was isolating. And then I started my own experience, and parents around the corner, friends all over the place. I was earning enough money that I didn't need to worry, and had a co-parent at that time, a co-parent who was willing and able to be involved. I often felt, am I doing disservice to the true single moms out there by calling myself one? So I've always been
Right.
very careful with that, because everything's offensive these days on social media, but I also know the pain of having to do it all by yourself, and never wanted to make flaunt my privilege in somebody else's face in that regard, right? So
Um,
it's interesting having this conversation, because s- this riles people up, as you know.
I felt that, I think, in speaking to friends who, for one reason or another, just do not have the type of co-parent that I have, and just kind of feeling like, hearing them say, well, you're lucky because you have someone who can pick your kid up, or you're lucky because of this. And I think I was kind of initially offended by that, like, wait, this is still a struggle. But no, I mean, I think it's a huge relief and a huge source of support to have a parent in my son's life who gets it, who's been around since the beginning, who remembers when he was a little fat, chubby baby, and we can laugh about it. We don't have to be best friends,
Right.
but we are literally doing this together and experiencing this together. So I find that to be an enormous privilege.
Yes, it is. And to anybody listening who's sitting there saying, oh my God, we could never do that, we're never going to be good co parents because we can't be friends. I actually
Mm.
posted research last night that shows that the majority of children in divorced homes, they don't need their parents to be friends. They just need them to be civil and cordial. So if that's all you have, please, that's more than enough. But to your point, having that relationship now with my daughter's father, it wasn't always that way, and I remember putting the pressure on myself to, like, recreate this, I don't know, dynamic that nobody was ready for. Did you feel that in the beginning, or you guys were, like, good from the jump?
Oh no, we were not good from the jump. I think it's hard. I mean, breakups are hard. Someone's hurt, someone's disappointed, it's always difficult. And that, I want to say, the early days of co-parenting was a lot of me deciding that what was most important was uh, having a strong relationship as a family at some point. And I did a lot of choosing my battles, and I did a lot of, just avoiding different, more aggressive routes that I could have taken. I had a lot of people saying, drag them to court and all of that. And I feel
Mhm.
like I could have gone that route, and going that route is totally justifiable if you need to. But I didn't, specifically because of how divisive that process can be. And I just wanted to focus on, peace. I made a lot of sacrifices. I think he did too, as well. But now our son is 11. He just turned 11 Wednesday. And
Happy birthday, that's a big number.
it's an enormous number. And I'm really proud of, like, where we've come, where he came and dropped school supplies off because they started school yesterday, and stuck around for a little bit. And, like, we can kind of hang out for a little bit, and let our kids see that we are amicable and
Mhm.
friendly, and that, we've known each other for a long time, and that we're cool. And that was not what it looked like in the first few years after separation and divorce. It was
Same.
definitely not what it looked like. So,
Yeah, and it's not realistic. I mean, you're so
uh,
clouded by emotion, and you're only looking at how this person did you dirty, or how they didn't treat you or treated you. And for me, it was like, oh my God, I woke up one day, Ashley, and I'm like, my daughter is so lucky. Like, a dad that literally chooses her. He sacrificed a lot for her to stay in a community here where we live after we divorced, where he doesn't have family, where his support system was not there, but because he wakes up and chooses her every day. And it was like my whole lens shifted, despite
uh,
the fact that maybe we weren't speaking to each other as nicely as we should have been then, or he keeps her up too late and shows her R-rated movie. Whatever the differences were, I went big picture, and I found that it is so helpful when my clients are able to take that step back and see through that lens, because having another active parent in your child's life, it doesn't just make your life easier. Scientifically, research base shows that your kid will thrive that much more from having both parents involved. Not to say
yeah,
they can't with one. Many amazing, successful people raised by single mamas like you and I
I
but
approve.
it is an added bonus.
Absolutely. And I think what's great is that, there's been a lot of conversation, obviously, in my house about divorce with my kid. I wrote a kid's book about it, but it's like,
I know I want to get into that.
we will. But what I love is that um, he's very secure about it at this point. After all the conversations we've had and the nurturing that has happened in both of our homes, is my son is not. He doesn't feel like he comes from a broken home. I think that
Mhm.
he could argue anyone down, like there's nothing broken about my home. Everyone's fine. And I think that that's great, so that he has more empathy in regards to other kids or people he'll meet who are going through this, and he can say, it's fine, actually.
It's almost like you read my mind with the broken home segue I was about to take, which is going to lead us into your book. But there's a book that it's been out for a long time. It's called Mom's House, Dad's House. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was written one version for adults to understand how to help their kids through the divorce process. And there's a version written for kids, but there's a quote in the adult one that says, when the marriage ends, the family does not break. It does not magically disappear. It can instead expand into separate healthy cells from the same organism. The total amount of time spent together is not necessarily the most important characteristic of a family, but the commitment and caring for one another is. And that, to me, like, that just hits,
Yeah.
because when you do sit down and explain divorce to a child, it's giving this idea that we may not look the same anymore, but we are not broken. We're just restructuring. We're still healthy cells, but now we're going to be in different places. So with
Right.
that, I want to talk about another valuable book that helps children through divorce, and that's yours. I want to hear all about it.
Oh, I love this book because it came about kind of organically. I was My son spent some time over the summer at my sister's house in California, and I came to pick him up. And mind you, my sister, very nuclear family. She's been with her husband for like 20 years at this point. They have 3 kids. They had one at the time. And I think it was the first time where my kid kind of realized, oh, this is not what my family looks like. And when I came to pick him up, he was a little annoyed with me. He was like, he had questions. All of a sudden, he was 7.
How old?
And
Wait, when you split, how old was he?
he was 3
Okay,
when
so young.
we
Yeah.
officially split. Yeah. So I just, he just hadn't, I think, conceptualized it at that level of maturity at that point. And so just out of the blue had all of these questions that I had never really heard him ask that way before. Why are you and daddy not together? When are you going to get back together? What is it? All these very pointed questions. And I didn't feel prepared enough in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nobody
I
ever is. It
no,
hits
yeah,
you
I
at,
just did not see it coming at all. I thought, like, you get it?
especially, yes, when your children are young, we have this misconception of like, oh, they don't remember, they won't know. But they do go through a period, it happened to my daughter too, of mourning the loss of what they can't remember. And that's where those questions come from.
Absolutely. And just seeing it in their peers and just
Mhm.
feeling a little bit othered by that. So I felt for a loss for word. I felt a loss for words and went kind of looking for resources that kind of watered it down. And I didn't find anything. So I ended up just like writing notes on my computer about like what to say so that I could readdress it better. Cause I kind of stumbled through that conversation and was like, let's talk when we get back home, and
Uh-huh.
stalled for time. Um, and those notes became a more structured conversation about sort of just the beautiful side um, of being whole and feeling safe, whatever that looks like, and that family is not defined by where you live. And that became the book. And I reached out to Jelani Memory, who's the founder of a Kids Co, because they had this amazing offering of kids' books that were written in just very simplistic ways, really complicated, hard topics. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everything from suicide to school shootings at this point, they touch on everything.
Wow.
Um, and I didn't see divorce at the time. And so I emailed him directly and was like, hey, you guys should do a book on divorce. And I linked to an article that I wrote to say, like, this is something that I think people need to talk about. And he kind of just said, well, you write it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, it was a really cool collaborative process. And we made this book that just kind of walks you through a conversation. You read it with your kid and it starts the conversation for you, and gives kids sort of a language to use to ask the questions that they have.
Yeah, and I say it all the time, there's no greater resource for explaining this to your children than books. We use the books to open up conversations, to get them to ask questions, to explain things in language they can understand because, yeah, we fumble when it's, even now when my daughter asks me questions with all that I know and all the certifications and trainings, I'm like, "I'm gonna get back to you on that," which is a very okay answer. I'd rather say I don't know than give her some bullshit because they always see through that. But I think
True.
it's these books are such helpful tools.
Yeah, I also wanna I'm gonna maybe link to you the book, and I can offer a discount code for your listeners, because I really think that it's such a great, valuable source to have in the library, especially for young kids like 5, 6, 7, 8, those early
Mhm,
ages. So
mhm.
I would love to share that with the listeners.
We would love that, and, I have the name of your book here. It's literally called A Kid's Book About Divorce. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't get any easier if you Google books for kids about divorce, like, this will probably be the first one that comes up, but we will definitely link it. I wanna also talk about something else we brought up offline, about the village and all this controversy about the village. I wanna hear your thoughts on what's going on, because for those of you who did not know, just like I didn't know, there's this theory online now that the village is not free, and the village that we literally need to survive and thrive as single moms or moms in general, where is it and why is it coming at a cost?
Yeah, I mean, I came across this video and then I saw it on multiple accounts on social media, where a woman, a mother was saying, "Where's this village that everyone's talking about? Um, I can't find it." And then someone stitched it and said, "Well, we have to prepare women to pay for their village," and they were referring to nannies, housekeepers, things like that, which sounds like staff to me, not village. And not at all to say that those are not valuable tools to have in your, tool belt, is to have some kind of like supplemental help if you can afford it. But realistically, a lot of folks cannot afford that. And so I think it pained me a little bit to hear that, especially as someone who has heavily leaned into the village and creating community, as someone who literally left California and moved here with a 3-year-old. My ex-husband and I moved here as separate people. We had already decided to divorce and moved here to New York. So I was really on my own. And had friends and everything like that. But there's a different kind of community when you're talking about your friends and when you're
Mhm.
talking about the community around your family and your children. And I learned how to intentionally create that community. And I would never want someone who wants to have children to be deterred from the experience of having them because they think they don't make enough money to afford a staff.
Agree. I had no staff when I had my daughter. When I was separated, I had a cleaning lady that would come to my little townhouse like once a month, which was like I was cleaning most of the time anyway, but it made me feel like, okay, someone, is helping me out here. But I definitely could have done without her. I could not have done without my free village, which, were the friends that stuck around when shit got hard. A lot of them did not. So I really learned to appreciate the people in my life who were there unconditionally. But yes, would your life be easier with a full-time staff and a chef and a this and a that? Probably, but that's not emotional support. And for me, the idea of village is somebody who can hold your hand through a hard time, which I don't know that you'd ask a nanny to do.
No, and I that's a great point. I think probably one of my most underrated subtle forms of community support is when a friend, so my son's best friend lives across the street, which is an enormous privilege that they live right there. But just our kids hanging out and us sharing a glass of wine and talking and catching up, and it's like sharing the emotional load of having kids for a little bit. I was just like, I'll bring my kid over there and we'll hang for the day,
Mhm,
or can you take him today and I'll take him on
mhm.
Thursday. I'll pick him up on, whatever, and they can spend the night and you get a break. Those are, I think, part of a lot of work and creating, like, sowing seeds and like creating relationships with people really intentionally and saying, what do you need? How can I help? Or sharing what I need and asking for help, which is another really important
That's
element of creating community.
It's so
Is saying,
funny because the women who end up like in our situations are very often the ones who don't like asking for help. What is that
oh,
about?
absolutely. I mean, I feel like this weird kind of reward system I think that mothers have, where we kind of feel more valuable when we're drowning, or we feel more like we're doing
You're
it right
so
when
messed
we're
up, but
overwhelmed.
it's so
I
true.
hate it, but it's true. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm super busy, and like, oh, I'm even more, we're doing it right because we're overwhelmed. And I have really tried to remove myself from that and to just tell other women, whether they have kids or not. Honestly, I think women across the board do this. Just like, I congratulate you for resting instead of like overwhelming yourself. And like, I hope you're okay. I hope you get rest. Don't respond to this text, by the way. Like, you don't have to engage right now.
Yes. Yes.
Um, Instead of just being like, oh, you got it. You know, it's what
Mhm.
we do, right? And kind of laughing it off. I unsubscribe. Absolutely
You know
not.
what's so annoying, Ashley? I just went back to school and I'm turning 40 this year. And I decided, why not? Right? Let's add
Absolutely.
a pile of shit to my life. It's actually been amazing and so transformative. But I had so much anxiety of now, last time I was in grad school, I was single, unattached, no child, lived at home, didn't have bills.
Right.
Now it's wow. And I was expressing to a lot of my friends how stressed out I was about adjusting to this change and fitting it all in and making it happen. And everyone's response was, oh, if anyone can do it, it's you. I'm like,
Oh,
it's it's so well-meaning and well-intentioned and flattering. And also at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm drowning here. But I do also have a village that I'm so grateful for, a couple of moms whose kids are very close with mine. And we're all always pitching in, but they always are the ones reminding me, like, no, no, we'll do the carpool today, Michelle. You did it yesterday. That's what helping out is. Like, I always need a reminder to take a
yeah.
break. And
Everybody needs a friend they can kind of fall apart with. That's not
yeah,
going to be like the whole, oh, you got it. You're the strong one. You can handle it. But it's
I bet
also
you're
just,
the strong one too, though, for your
I
people.
do. I know I get that a lot. I think I started pushing back on that though. And so I feel like being able to be more vulnerable with people, I stopped doing the I'm fine thing when people would be like, how are you? And I'd be like, I'm literally falling apart today. I don't have space to engage much. I love you. I'm going to disengage today. And not feeding into the idea that because I'm a mom who has a career and all of these different things I think people tick off as like, oh, you got it. That I'm allowed to like fall apart. I'm allowed to have mental health issue for a few days, or like need to be depressed for a second, or have to like do less instead of just being overwhelmed, so that I can fit this idea of what motherhood should look like.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we've done a really great job in our society of painting this picture of mothers that is like, you got carpool and you've got soccer and you've got all these different classes and all these different things, and you look fabulous and everything's, everyone's happy. You're emotionally drowning, but that's just the price you pay to be a good mom.
Mhm.
And I just think that at the end of the day, if I'm too overwhelmed to really be present with my son, and be curious and have enough patience for his own emotional up and downs, then I'm lacking.
Right.
Whatever it is that I need to do to make sure that I'm available in that way is the
Yeah,
most important thing.
for sure. I want to circle back to the stigma of single motherhood. And movies have done single moms no favors, and the media and songs out there. I there's a song from like when I grew up. I'm probably older than you. Um, God, it's gonna come to me. You'll know it. I'll probably send it to you separately. But anyway, how do you feel? Because we've all experienced the stigma. I'll never forget when I got separated. My daughter was 2. She was in
Mhm.
literal daycare. She wasn't even in school. And the teacher called me in one day and was like, yeah, she kept throwing her spoon on the floor today. I know things must be hard at home now that you're a single mom and all. And I'm like, dude, she's
God.
fucking 2, man. Like,
Could
right?
it be
But
possible?
that was my experience. And now here you are, a Black single mother, where there's more stigmatization there than I experienced, right? So I want to hear how that was for you, and do you feel you're still battling like the stereotype or what you do to get through that?
Yeah, I think that the whole Black single mothers are generally synonymous with baby mama, no matter what, no matter how you had gotten to the place of being a single
Yep.
person. And very much tied to statistics that are not really equitable or always correct, but that paint them as impoverished, no resources, just kind of deprived. And I feel like there is definitely a reality there when you're talking about systemic racism interacting with parenthood. But um, there is this kind of just this assumption that you're struggling. I remember maybe it was last year, I got into an Uber when I picked my son up from school, which I usually do because the school was just far enough to be like out of the way. And we were riding home, and the Uber driver, I guess, was trying to make small talk and said something like, "Hey, where's dad?" And I was
Ugh,
like, "Who picks their kid up with both parents, whether you're married or not? Like, who's doing
right.
that?" But he asked that of my son, and my son was like, "At home?" Like he was just kind of like weirded out by it too. And then the small talk continued, even though I was trying not to speak to this person at that point. But at a certain point, he inquired how I could afford an Uber to and from school
Stop
for my
it.
kid. And I'm
Was he
thinking,
white?
this, yes, he wasn't American.
That's
I'll give him that.
okay.
There's a little
Okay.
lack of like reading the room, but definitely a white man. And I felt I immediately knew it was happening. I'm like, oh, he sees a Black mother and he assumes everything he's ever seen on TV or read anywhere and is projecting that onto me. And I felt on one hand, I'm so defensive. And I was like thinking, he doesn't know that I make six figures. He doesn't know that I'm, his father and I
A
are
badass. Yeah.
co-parenting,
Right.
that this is a planned pregnancy and all of these things that I was thinking of to combat what this person assumed about me. And then also just like, who cares? Like, even if I was someone who had just happened to get pregnant and was raising a kid and dad was not around, like you're still a valuable person. You still matter. You still should feel safe when you're riding in an Uber. And so I think my takeaway from that was just to start to understand my own relationship with being a single mother, and feeling how defensive that I was. It was like, wow, I have some things to work on because this still feels really painful
Mhm.
to be seen in this way. But
But I
generally,
don't see, I know that like your triggers show you where you need to heal and all of that, but these microaggressions or these, I think this was a very subconscious, like unaware way of expressing a form of not racism per se, but like, here's a stereotype I'm going to throw at you,
yeah,
right? Like, I'm Jewish, I'm cheap, right? So like I've gotten that. That's, it's
yeah,
and people throw it at you without realizing like the larger context of the issue.
yeah,
And it's just so unfortunate. I found the song I was thinking of and I'm bringing it up for a reason. City
yeah.
High, what would you do? Do you remember that song?
Oh,
What would
yes.
you
Okay,
do
so
if
we're
your
like
son
the
was
same
at
age.
home? Okay, but I'm bringing this up because I remember recently I was in the car with a friend and it came on and we were like jamming out. You see those videos when people are like, "Whoa," when you realize what the lyrics really are.
Yeah,
I'm like, this is fucked up. Like, this is
yeah,
why there are such stereotypes of single mom in general. Like, she's gonna wind up on the pole. She's gonna go be a hoe. Like, it's really, really messed up. And it has created this so many women who come to me and they'll say, I want to get divorced, but I don't want to be that single mom. I'm like, but
yeah,
that's not what you have to be just because, we've been told that if you end up single mom, you're bad and,
yeah.
the man is better off.
I really love the newer kind of, I'm seeing a new narrative around being single mothers, especially among Black mothers. One podcast that I absolutely love is Good Moms, Bad Choices. I feel like they do a great job of kind of owning their sensuality and their individuality as mothers and not necessarily centering, I have a kid, so I have to like condense myself and minimize myself and just be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing about it is like, even if you are a mother who is also on the pole, you're still valid, you're still It doesn't make you a bad mom. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you're not taking care of your child and loving them and nurturing them. And I think there's a lot of, I think, more nuance that we can start to embrace as a society and say, you can be so many things at
Hmm.
once, and it doesn't have to be bad or negative. It doesn't have to, box you into this concept of you've failed at something.
Right. And it just always feels like women are always fighting against something, right? Whether it's, not earning as much as their male colleagues, or being criticized for being a working mom and then being criticized for being a stay-at-home mom, or then, that being a single mom, a Black single mom. Like there's always some battle that we're fighting, and that goes back to the village and why it's so important to have your people to help normalize what it is that you're up against all the time.
Absolutely. And just also just self-defining, a life that is self-defined. And not necessarily feeling like, oh, this is the box I guess I have to fit into, and I have to, apologize for that everywhere I go. I think standing in what your life is, whatever that looks like, and still requiring love and still requiring people to respect that and to see it and not hiding it, is really important. There's too much shame wrapped up in like divorce or single parenting. And I feel like the more we just refuse that as something that is our
Yeah.
responsibility, the reason why people struggle in society when they're dealing with divorce or single parenthood has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the fact that we live in a world that makes it difficult to exist, period. So
Yeah.
it's always,
Oh
we
shit. Yeah.
didn't do this. So the
Right.
onus is not on us in the first place. And I think that's kind of when my mind shifted, where I'm like, I didn't set the system up like this. I'm still allowed to love the way I need to
Hmm.
and be in a relationship in the way that I need to. And I shouldn't have to apologize for the fact that the world is small-minded. It's not me.
Yeah, and I do think it takes a lot of self-awareness too, and understanding, who you are in light of the way the world might want to see you,
Mhm.
that self-trust and that self-confidence, owning your privilege, right? And privilege, and not in the context of how much money you have, but what are the day-to-day things that you get to experience that make your life easier, and and accepting that and being grateful and using that as the lens in which you view other people and their situations and what they bring to you. So I don't know, you're wonderful. And we went so many directions, and I'm so
I
glad that we did. What else would you like to talk about
covered
today?
it all. No, I mean, I really do like, oh, speaking of the podcast that I mentioned, I heard the other day, one of the co-hosts, Erica, mentioned something that was a piece of advice. I've been asked what was the best advice you got as a parent. One piece of advice that I got, which was from my mom, the best advice I've ever received, and Erica touched on this on their podcast, which was let your kid grow into the life they have. And it was so
Mm,
simple. She said it just, it wasn't like she sat and like started this whole thing. It was just, she said it on the fly. I think my son was like 3 weeks old at the time. And I was already sensing the beginning of the end of my marriage, feeling very stressed out about it and worried, kind of what we just talked about. Oh my God, I'm going to be a single mom. And she was like, you're going to be a person, and your kid is going to grow into the life that they have. And you get to define whether or not it is enough, And so I always encourage, because of that advice, I always encourage, especially new moms, like just be yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you want to play music in the morning, play music in the morning. If you want to have friends over, have friends, like whatever your life looks like, your child will grow into it and see it as love, as long as they're safe and they're cared for, obviously. But like this whole idea that we have to break ourselves and contort ourselves into what we think this baby needs is just
right.
wrong. It's just not, it's incorrect.
I have to tell you, as much as I love my husband, I'm remarried, and our life and all of these things, I always talk about, and I wrote about in my book, the time I was a single, alone mom with my
Mm.
daughter in our little townhouse, with, you couldn't even turn around without hitting a wall, but it was just such a time of happiness and love, and getting to mom in my own way without
Yeah.
like anybody else's opinions, and the music on, and the wanting to sleep in bed together, fine, no big deal. Like that was such a major powerful time in my life, a happy time that even my daughter remembers bits and pieces of now, and we just loved it so much. So mamas, like, make that time your own, let your child grow into it. It doesn't have to look any which way in order to be okay for you or for anybody else for that matter.
Mm. They will be fine. They'll be
It'll be
fine.
fine.
Yeah, I can say that now. I feel like I'm over the 10-year hump now. I'm like, I have a middle schooler. I guess he's still cooking, but like, I feel
No,
like
I
we
think by
line
now,
up.
yeah. And when you get divorced when your kids are young, they really don't
Yeah,
remember any other way. So on
yeah,
one hand, that's an advantage, but like we also talked about, they're going to mourn the loss of what they don't remember. So it's going to bring
yeah,
up some tough stuff, but yay for raising resilient children, right? We did the
yeah.
work.
I wanted to live my life. I wanted to be a whole person. I didn't want to not be a whole person just because I had divorced his father. And so I mean, my kids seen me date, seen me go through breakups, seen, just the realities of life. And as long as I meet those moments with love and as much transparency as is appropriate and, for their age, it's always been a learning experience that we can draw from, that he can draw from as like, oh, it's okay to center my needs when I'm navigating relationships. It's okay to say, I don't want this anymore. It's okay to say,
Mhm,
to detach from people who are not serving me. That's something that he learned because he's seen me go through a breakup.
mhm,
It's not traumatizing if it's
mhm.
a loving conversation.
And if it benefits your life in the long run, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
also, just because society has painted single motherhood in a certain way, I want to say this to everybody because everyone comes to me with this concern. Don't let that stop you. That stigma or that stereotype stop you from
Mhm.
doing what you need to do. And also, don't let society put shame on you for doing what you need to do to raise that child. And that's what I brought up with that song. It was like, it was almost like shaming, like someone desperate to take care of their child. And I hear it now in the context of like, you got to do the best you can as a mom, but anything you do is not going to be good enough, right? We're going to paint that in a bad light. So if you are in that situation, be proud when you put your head down on the pillow at night knowing you're doing anything and everything you can to create a better life for your child, whatever way you need to do it.
Absolutely. And I fully abide by the notion that um, you can be a single mother in and out of marriage. There's a lot of women who are married who feel like single mothers,
Ooh, truth
broken
bomb.
moms.
Wow. Okay. Gotta write this one down.
So it's also just like a totally made up concept in the first place. So being okay is what matters.
Yeah, you can feel very lonely when you're with somebody.
Mhm.
Alone is very different than lonely, ladies.
Yeah. Mhm.
True story. That is a good point. Okay.
Mhm.
Covered 600 topics, got to know more about you, promoted the book, showed my age with the song I was
So
thinking
I
of.
think we're the same age. You said you turned 40 this year.
Yeah, you
I
too?
turned 40 next May.
Oh, okay. I'm in November. Oh, good. Good for us in the best season of our lives, right? Someone said to me recently, oh God, turning 40, that was hard for me. How does that feel for you? And I'm like, kind of doing okay. I mean, my
Yeah.
metabolism sucks, but otherwise, like, I mean, I'm back in school. I
Yeah.
feel so fulfilled by the work that I do. My co-parent and I are now planning a ski trip again this
Oh,
year
I love
together.
that.
Like, what do I have to complain about? I'm alive.
I love it. I have friendships with women of all generations. One of my friends is in her 60s, like friend, not my auntie, but my friend. And I love hearing women talk about their 40s and 50s because the reviews are glowing. They're like,
Hmm.
no, your 40s are actually it. They lied about your
Hmm.
20s. Your 20s are
Hmm.
like confusing and you haven't found like the right
Sucked.
lip
Yeah.
yet or whatever. You're in your 40s and you figured it out. You feel more secure. You're still fine, like whatever. You're still beautiful, gorgeous, whatever, by all the stupid standards out there. And you're not as confused about yourself. I think that growing into that knowledge is priceless.
And you have, like, I found for myself, detachment is something I was never good at. And
Yeah.
like, I've mastered that now because I value myself so much more wholly and fully than I ever did before. So many good things come with age. I agree.
Yeah, and goodbye is a lot easier once you get older.
not answering the phone, not dropping everything for that one-sided friendship. So many things are easier now, Ashley. Life is easier with you in it because you are giving so much good knowledge to the people who need it. We now consider you part of our village, and I'm grateful for that. Everybody needs to check out Ashley if they haven't already on IG. I will link the book. And you are a writer. You're in Brooklyn, right? I used to live in
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Good stuff.
It's good here.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy. For those of you listening, have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Moms Moving On.